This is Trend Following Radio, where great thinking comes alive. Nobel Prize winners, legendary traders, best-selling authors, and the pros that know what drive us irrational human beings. I am your host, Michael Coveil. Not filtered, raw, honest. That's my passion. My guest today is Brad Rotter. Brad is a speculator. He's a venture capitalist. He looks for big trends. He's not a trend-following trader per se, even though he's made money in the trend-following world. He was perhaps, and I think he says, the first investor in Richard Dennis back in the early 1980s. That he put money with Richard Dennis. This is a very wide-ranging conversation we have today. And the premise is, Brad's premise, is that America has peaked. Secondarily, he sees Bitcoin as a tremendous opportunity. I don't know, but the reason I wanted to have the conversation today with Brad about these subjects is to learn. Let me hear his perspective. I hope you enjoy our conversation. Hey, Brad.
Hello, Michael. How have you been?
Not too bad. Not too bad.
Tell me everything that's happened to you since we last spoke.
I don't know. I forgot what happened 5 minutes ago.
Are you living in Vietnam?
I'm here right now. I've been in Asia since February and was speaking across Asia to mutual funds, sovereign wealth funds, hedge funds, and had a good time in Saigon and had been here for a few months. And I'll be back in the States in December, but I will probably be back to Asia in February. So that's the plan as of right now.
Interesting. Go east, young man.
Yes, I think there's a real mistake in our country that, not that there's anything wrong with Spanish, but I think there's some Asian languages that should be part of the school curriculum versus what most Americans receive today. So, but it's all good. It's all good. So listen, I had a couple things I want to get out of the gate before we start chatting. Okay. And my first thing I just want to ask you is, why are you an entrepreneur?
Oh, I think it's
a loaded question.
It's like Catholicism. You're born with it.
That's a good answer. I like that answer. I'm not going to let you get away with that, though. You got to give me more than that.
Well, I mean, I grew up on a farm in Iowa, and farming is pretty entrepreneurial. My salary for baling hay and herding cows and fixing fences was a Black Angus steer every year. And if you picked the right steer, you could win a blue ribbon at the fair and sell it for twice as much as the red and green ribbons. So it was kind of an embedded part of growing up on a farm. We'd be selling eggs and services, all kinds of things. It was. I mean, do you mean how I got into it originally, or why I persist today?
Well, yeah, everything, of course. I want to drill in deep. I think that's folks want to learn. But I mean, you lay out the initial early young man experiences on a farm, seeing the entrepreneurial aspect, but it's another jump to either starting a business, getting to the floor of the CBOT, funding other traders, moving into venture capital, boards of directors of firms. I know there are iterative steps all along the way, but is there an early stage beyond just having successes, which probably were huge motivators? Were there any next step stages that pushed you along?
Well, there were actually. I began speculating in commodities when I was 15 in my father's futures account. I think that sparked my drive to try to figure out how to predict the future.
Did your father have any problem with that? Was he completely supportive of that?
Oh yeah. It was his account. He was aware of that activity.
Well, I didn't mean to infer that you were that much of a rebel, but you could have maybe, pulled his ear off. But he was very supportive of the idea.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I just talked to him this morning and told him that we were going to have this interview. He's still with us. I call myself a speculator. I've been speculating since I'm a very young man. I speculated my way through. I was trading sugar and equity options when I was a cadet at West Point, which was difficult to do.
But when it comes down to it, though, you're ultimately, I know you have certain passions, but you are agnostic to the particular opportunity. You're a speculator in the truest sense that if it's a good opportunity and you understand it, you're going to go in.
That's largely true, but I have a very, very fine filter. And it sort of crystallized in 2006. I was asked to give the keynote speech at the Mar Hedge Fund conference in San Francisco. But I thought long and hard about what I was going to say. I wanted to make an impact. So the day of the speech arrived and I walked up to the podium. I literally had figured out what I was going to say, minutes before, but I gave a talk called Why I'm Getting Out of Hedge Funds. And I still get emails about that speech. I remember this was at the hedge fund conference, and I just remember looking out over a bunch of, dazed looks. But I knew I was right. I'd basically come to the conclusion that U.S. civilization was peaking, and that the set of available returns available in the hedge fund market were not going to be worth the fees that were being charged to gather them.
Well, that's where what I was going to ask next is that I constantly get asked these questions about strategy, and they often use just some particular hedge fund or a type of strategy or these professional managers as a proxy. And I do it too, to some degree, but ultimately you've got to separate strategy and the Wall Street fees business and then make judgments about each of those in my humble opinion. Because the fees business is a beast. It's a beast.
A beast in what way?
Well, a beast in the sense that it's great if people want to pay you lots of fees. But if you're trying to look at a particular strategy and you're not really understanding the fee structure, you can end up with something that you might end up making a judgment about the strategy that could be completely different than otherwise. But there was a great thing about Morgan Stanley recently about the fees they were charging in the managed futures space. And basically people were not making anything because of the fees.
And I haven't historically been fee sensitive. When I think we talked about this once before, but I started investing in hedge funds in 1982. There may have been someone investing in hedge funds longer than me, but I ain't met them. And it was an offshoot. I was trading on the floor and catching some big trends. And in order to diversify, I'd literally take money out of my account once a week and diversify into other friends of mine who were doing different strategies in markets I wasn't involved with. And I'd establish managed accounts and let them speculate on my behalf. So I was Richard Dennis's first client when he started managing money, literally.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty it's a fun piece of history, huh?
But I used to tremble when I opened the statements, though, because he was extremely volatile.
Yeah.
But
I had fun digging up his early performance data and putting in the book that I did. Finding those original volatile months. I tell you what, though, I want to jump right in because I think the audience is probably dying because we just left it hanging there, which is you described peak civilization, and you and I just started talking about fees on Wall Street, where I'm sure the audience is like, hold on. Brad just described a situation where he thinks we're at peak civilization. I think we kind of walked right past that. But before
well,
you
one last thing
ahead,
on the
go
fee,
ahead.
I just want to say I was not fee sensitive. I think in some of those early days, I paid a few guys like 6 and 30. I think Willis Jenkins was 6 and 30 or some crazy number, but there was money laying on the pavement to be picked up.
Right.
The markets weren't efficient. This was, there were actually edges in the marketplace that could be exploited. I used to speculate on the Chicago Board of Trade and then go to night school at the University of Chicago and listen to Nobel laureates talk about the efficient market theory. And I used to sit in the back of the class and snicker at these misguided Nobel Prize winners.
Well, they just rewarded the most famous of the Chicago guys, didn't they? I mean,
yeah. Well, they were great economists, but they indeed turned out to be right about the efficient market theory. But like me, they were early. The markets weren't remotely efficient. I found, because I had traded bonds on Wall Street, I knew I had great sensitivity to the value of a Dow Jones tape. And I found a place in the bond pit where I could see the Dow Jones tape in the grain room. And literally I could, when PPI would come out during the market thing, you literally had 10 seconds where you could put on a trade after a shocking PPI number. The phones would then start lighting up and orders written up and would flow into the pit. But, there was a delay. Now it's milliseconds.
Well, I think here's the thing. I think you're going to raise a lot of different issues in our conversation today.
Yeah.
And before we even get to the peak issue, I want to go back to something you told me a few years ago. And you were the first person to really turn me on to this thinking. And I think it was in a quick phone call, and it probably was in the last 3 years. And you just said, Mike, technology is arbing away the need for people. And I was like a light bulb moment for me. And then I started to see, maybe not said as bluntly as that, but I started to see people working around the edges of that thought process. And I said to myself, why am I going to work around the edges? What Brad said is true if anybody wants to be honest about it. And I can see that that's probably, and I'm going to let you elaborate here, but that's probably one of the elements that feeds into the idea that you think we could be at, quote, peak civilization.
Yeah, don't get me going. Lately, I've been telling people there's only going to be two kinds of people: those who design robots and those who work for robots.
So basically, it's kind of like the Matrix and Terminator slashed together, and for real life.
Absolutely, and there's great manifestations. It was the internet. In my model, it's the internet that is the main culprit for, what seemed like a bold forecast in 2006 that U.S. civilization was peaking. It's not that bold a forecast. They all peak. Now, it doesn't happen very often, but it always happens. And there's been thousands of civilization. It kind of depends on how you measure them, but it's not just the Romans and the Greeks and the Aztecs. It's the Navajo and Apache, and there have been thousands of civilizations depending on how you measure them, and they all peak. And so it's very interesting. It's very interesting to watch. And I'm not a negative guy. I think most people that know me think the opposite. I mean, I'm pretty optimistic about life and truth and friendship and so forth. And it's rather fucking cool to live at a peak of civilization. It doesn't happen very often. So we're actually quite blessed to be able to experience this. What no civilization has experienced before, however, is a change in the unit of time. Unit of time doesn't change very often. It changed slightly with the first carrier pigeon. It changed again with the telegraph. Did you know they used to send they used to send stock prices to Philadelphia with using torches on hilltops.
Did
you know that?
No, I did not. I did not.
Yeah. They would relay stock prices with using torches on hillsides. So
define that though for me a little bit better. The unit of time. Define where you're going with that.
The internet changed the unit of time, and everything became instantaneous. It wasn't just stock prices. It was a combination of Motley Fool and Yahoo stock message boards. Later Twitter and Facebook, but that was the internet enabled arbitrage of everything: people, capital, currency, ideas, business models, intellectual property. And from a long history of being an arbitrageur, arbitrage always has one outcome. It narrows differences. The differences that are in aggregate that are being narrowed is our standard of living difference. And that's what's causing the angst in the United States at the moment, is that people subconsciously know that
it's happening.
That it's happening. I mean, and it's very, very difficult to see when you're in the middle of it. There wasn't one Mesopotamian who thought he was at the peak of civilization. It's almost impossible to see when you're in the middle of it. But it's very important to observe and come to grips with, because there are many things more important. So, put differently, our standard of living difference is narrowing. It's extremely apparent to me. And people go, well, what does that mean? What are you looking at? And I said, it's getting harder and harder to make an easy living.
Let me shift gears. Do not shift gears, but so you're a speculator, and you're mapping out a scenario. We're talking about arbitrage. We're talking about getting rid of inefficiencies, just narrowing it down. But you're not saying, from a speculator standpoint, you wake up every day still motivated by the idea that there are big moves for you to find. There are big bets to place. There are big rewards for you to find. That's not gone from you. But I think you're saying that the landscape that we've maybe known for a long time is shifting. The shifting sands are there.
Exactly.
Let me dig a little bit deeper on the idea of technology arbing away the need for people, because I'm speaking jargon when I say that. I mean, I get deep in my gut how you can simplify a very complex set of scenarios into that simple sentence, and I get it deep in my gut. I know exactly where you're coming from. But I think a lot of people might hear that and they're going through their day-to-day life, and it just doesn't sink in. But even when you look at something simple like the unemployment rates across the world, the young people unemployment rates, it's just massive. If you add in other factors like student debt, and every time you see these aggregate numbers, you're just like, when can this all end? And then you look at what's going on with the Fed, and you put these things in the blender, and you just scratch your head and say, it can't end well. I guess we got some similar views. I don't know.
I want to interview you someday. That would be fun. Well, I've been giving speeches around the country since I made that hedge fund speech. I decided to kind of, widen the purview and get that message out to more people. So I began giving speeches around the country called "Investing at the Peak of U.S. Civilization." Just because it was a bold, fun topic, and it got discussions going. But I just thought I guess I viewed myself as Paul Revere putting a lantern in the church tower, and this was pretty clear to me, and I just thought I'd begin to chronicle basically the ancillary evidence that this might be happening. And one of the things I like to use is I carry it with me at all times and bring it out in basically every meeting that I'm at. But I once did the largest transaction ever done on eBay. I bought a $50 trillion Zimbabwe note for $9.95 free shipping.
I know where you're going with this.
And I carry it around and show people, and they think it's a joke, they think it's a toy. But then I remind them the Zimbabwe dollar used to trade through the U.S. dollar, 1.7 to 1.
Okay, so here's the pushback. The pushback is there's no more wages. Unemployment is high. There's deflation. And that the Fed has got it perfectly figured out that when inflation appears, they can take action. As Bernanke has said, we can take action immediately.
Alan Greenspan was my first boss when I did an internship in the Council of Economic Advisors. I don't think that that their ability to take action is quite as strong as they think it is. I think the Fed is basically like a deer in the headlights right now. I think they're trapped. Okay,
let me take it back a step. If they did not do what they've done the last 3 or 4 or 5 years, equity markets would be
the way Michael. The way I look this might be interesting to put in the interview, but the way I look at it, the government is a very, very large hedge fund. Instead of charging 2 and 20, it's 0 and 50. They take half of what you make. So it's always in the government's best interest when they have the power to do so is to print the currency. It lifts the real level of or the apparent level of real estate prices. It lifts the apparent level of equity prices, and it's one big giant taxable event, 0 and 50.
Well, I think our speaking of flyover country, I believe Mr. Buffett made the comment recently that the Fed is the greatest hedge fund in history, and he was supportive of it.
Well, I'm not supportive of it.
No, you know why? Because listen. Here's the thing I don't like about all this stuff is that if you grow up and you've got any sense of morality and ethics, it's like when the system gets rigged to the benefit of other people, and it's done under the guise of this republic that we all want to believe in so much, and then half the country refuses to admit, even though they know deep in their gut that it is being rigged, but they don't want to admit it because they're getting their free lunch. So it just becomes almost like a big it's a republic lynch mob almost in some ways. It's frustrating.
And the way I'm playing that, I think one of the most interesting speculations of our lifetime will be in an alternative currency. I'm buying Bitcoin. I believe Bitcoin is the closest thing to the perfect currency that I've ever seen. It's a perfect currency. I have a theory it was not invented by a unknown, invisible young man in Japan. It could have only been invented by the NSA. It's a perfect currency. Are you involved in it at all?
I'm not. In fact, I've read bits and pieces, and I did a little bit of reading and watched a few videos tonight. If it is something that you can believe in, that ultimately is not controlled by a government, I think you and I can see the immediate benefits. But you've already just outlined a pretty daunting thought. So maybe I'll let you explain a little bit more.
Well, I've always had a premonition that in the long run, and this is obviously going to be after we're gone, but there's really only going to be one currency. It's inefficient to have two. It's inefficient to have two languages. And that might, but they're on the same trajectory. I can't think of a currency other, other than gold and silver coins that has ever worked. And if there is one that's going to work, it ain't going to be this one, the U.S. dollar. The U.S. dollar has lost 95% of its value in our lifetime. And
the arguments would be, but look at America. Look at everything's gone. There's so much success. There's all this prosperity, and you're a doom and gloomer, Brad. I mean, everything's going great. Why can't you just sit at the table and have a glass of champagne and enjoy the party that's been created? Regardless if your stubborn insights into how things really work might be giving you bad feelings in your stomach.
Well, I think it will be easier to afford champagne if you have Bitcoin as a currency. I actually think that Bitcoin will be the highest performing financial asset for the rest of our lifetime.
Okay. You mentioned something, though.
That's a big statement.
Well, yeah, and you mentioned something before that, which would concern people. We're having this whole conversation about government and government interference. So you mentioned the NSA being involved, or having a thought or a conjecture that might be true. But is Bitcoin truly something that is going to be able to exist amongst free men around the world, who as a means of exchange and a good store of value, and not something that can be bastardized?
It's as close as we've come to the perfect currency. It's the most perfect currency that I have seen. And I'm glad you're looking at it. For you and your lifestyle, flitting around the world, you're going to find Bitcoin to be amazingly useful. In the blockchain that's used to record all of the Bitcoin transactions itself is it's like one of the seven wonders of the world. The blockchain itself is, it's up there with gravity in its utility. People are now using the blockchain for other activities like timestamping documents or contracts and placing a hash of them in the blockchain where they'll be recorded and timestamped for the rest of history. I mean, it's fascinating.
Does Bitcoin allow? And I hope I don't sound to the audience as too much of a novice or a newbie, but I am. So does Bitcoin, you can receive Bitcoin as payment, and that payment is not stored in one of the big government bailed out banks that have open doors to show everybody what your transactions are and what your net worth is, et cetera, et cetera. So if you receive payment in Bitcoin, that information, that total, that subtotal is not something that's purview to whatever authority around the world, whatever governmental authority it might be.
Absolutely correct. And therefore you're not subject to currency controls. In other words, there's no need for you now to take money to Vietnam and across the border. When you get to Vietnam, you open up your Bitcoin wallet and you're able to transact. I was at a wedding on Saturday night in Sausalito, and I gave the groom a Bitcoin, standing with him, and a glass of champagne. That was his wedding gift, a Bitcoin. And I was able to do it on my phone and just transfer it to him.
You're really inspiring me, because I've only looked at this just on a cursory level, and you are right. I mean, with the kind of lifestyle that I enjoy having. I mean, look, all I'm doing is trying to chase freedom, wherever it might be.
Yeah.
And so, well, now let me ask you, here's the follow-up question. And back to the government part, the taxing authorities are not going to be happy about this, are they?
Well, we'll still be taxed. I mean, it's an asset, and like every asset, it'll be taxed. So I'm not saying that there's a tax benefit to this. What I'm saying is that it's just another embodiment of the internet. Where is the internet? The internet is everywhere. So my Bitcoin currency is, it's peer to peer. it does not exist in a particular financial institution. It exists in cyberspace. And the most intriguing aspect about Bitcoin is that it can't be printed. It can be mined, and
that's a technical term for Bitcoin, though, right?
Exactly, and it's very akin to gold and silver in that they must be mined, and as you go deeper into the mine, the cost of mining gold and silver increased over time. It's very similar with the mining of Bitcoins. There's currently 11.8 million outstanding. So it has a market cap of, call it $2.25 billion. But the price has gone from 14 cents a coin to $211 per coin as of 14 minutes ago. So what's intriguing about this currency is that it could have substantial price appreciation as people around the world, start to use it. And when they start to use it, they're going to have a couple of coins. And as everybody buys a couple of coins, you're going to see price appreciation that's rarely seen in a financial asset.
Okay, could you also have a situation though where there could be multiple bubbles and crashes, even though it's going to keep moving forward, in your opinion, as the great currency of the future?
You can count on bubbles and crashes, but what's interesting about this currency is that it will have a tendency to melt up rather than down. When Cyprus confiscated people's bank accounts, people in that region raced to Bitcoin, and it traded up to $250 a coin. When it looked like the U.S. government was in danger of defaulting, the price of Bitcoin melted up. So I think that's an interesting aspect of Bitcoin, but it can't be printed. The key thing is that it can't be printed. There's only going to be 21 million coins mined, and if everybody has to buy a couple to do transactions on Amazon, Baidu last Friday announced that they were going to take Bitcoin. That's the Chinese Google.
Right.
That caused the currency to melt up, if you will. 3 weeks ago, I saw a company buy another company for $12 million. They used Bitcoin to pay for the transaction.
Well, that's some serious trust right there.
Exactly. I've seen numerous transactions of $1 million trades on Bitcoin. So it's happening. In San Francisco, you can buy a double decaf non-fat latte and use Bitcoin.
Okay, so let me just keep digging a little bit more because you've got much more experience in this topic. So we all want to believe that there can be this currency, the currency that you can. It's, and I don't say this as a pejorative, but for the gold bugs out there that have long said, back to a gold standard, this kind of moves past that into a whole different realm. Is it set up as it's the foundation that, you won't have it taken over by governments? Is it something that we can truly believe in, or is it something that can just be stopped by the powers that be if they don't like it for whatever reason they dream up that day?
You're asking the fundamental question. The governments ain't gonna like Bitcoin, because when people figure out that it's extremely useful for transactions, their appetite for holding their home currencies is going to decline, and the demand for Bitcoin, there's there's probably 69 digital currencies out there. Bitcoin is the one that I'm focused on. But I mean, it could change. So I'm talking about digital currency in general.
Right. And Bitcoin could end up being just like during the .com era. Look, there was Alta Vista, there was InfoSeek, there was Excite, there was Yahoo, and Google won.
Yeah, exactly. And it'll be very similar. It's better if there's one dominant digital currency than 69 of them. Although you'll be able to trade freely amongst them. But there are so many benefits to this currency versus any others. The ability to transact in this currency, there's almost infinitesimal transaction costs. So it will be cheaper to use Bitcoin than any other currency. You don't have to have a granite bank to keep your money in. You don't have to have Brinks to move currency around. You don't have to hire tellers to count the cash. It's very akin to what we were talking about in the beginning of the conversation, where there's technology does replace a lot of human activity. How long has it been since you've been to a travel agent? Or, I haven't been to a bank teller in a decade, probably. This digital currency will be a very safe place to keep part of your assets, and it will be immensely convenient for making transactions, because the cost of those transactions becomes negligible.
Okay, let me do a quick follow up, because I want to make sure to give you a chance. I don't know if your answer was it, but I'm still trying to wrap my arms around the idea that if I believe in Bitcoin and I want to start to put some of my assets in it, how much of a risk do you think there is that when government decides this is a target they don't like, that they will interfere, co-opt, shut down, take over, make illegal? Or is the foundation, the technical foundation, which I don't yet understand, is the technical foundation so solid, the peer-to-peer aspect, that folks that, like, let's say, habitate at the watering holes surrounding Congress will not be able to figure out a way to get their claws in it?
Well, I think it's going to be, I think it'll be very akin to the development of the internet. And the U.S. government, God bless them, through funding of DARPA, invented the internet. And I've had the privilege of meeting some of those guys. I've been involved in the internet since for a very long time, and had the chance to meet some of the guys that developed the internet. Actually, a friend of mine, Len Kleinrock, sent the first internet message that was ever sent. You know what it was?
I think I've heard this. I can't recall, though.
Log. The system crashed before he could write in. So the first internet message was log. But I think it's going to be very akin to the internet, in that the United States has lost control of the internet. The straw that broke the camel's back was these NSA revelations. And as a result of that, the United States does not have the universal control of the internet, and there's huge backlash around the world, and we know we've lost control of the internet. It's going to be because Bitcoin is the internet. It's going to be the same exact story. I think all governments, when they figure out Bitcoin, will realize that it's going to be a lot harder for them to sell people the copious currencies that they're printing. And so all governments are are going to be disadvantaged by a superior currency. But it's now too late for them
let's talk about
to take action.
Let's talk about the social ramifications of this, because there's going to be people, yourself, I'm listening and learning as you're talking. There's going to be plenty of people that say, wow, light bulb moment, it's blinking. I can see the writing on the wall. The future's unfolding. Let's move. Then there's going to be a lot of people that don't see anything because they're attached to the matrix. They're suckling at the teat of big government. They don't. I mean, and I'm not saying that necessarily, to be a mean guy. It's just the reality that some people have kind of lost. They've lost that robust nature, so to speak, of living on a farm. They don't know how to care for themselves, and I got to figure there's gonna be a social backlash that when the people that are awake and the people that are striving to maybe find more fairness in society do their own thing, a la creating a digital currency. There's going to be a lot of people that are not going to be happy about this. Maybe when they understand that they've trusted big government, whatever country you live in, that you've trusted big government, and a lot of bright entrepreneurs have been kind of moving forward on an alternate plan.
Well, I didn't quite understand the question.
Yeah, I think I just gave a speech I think I gave a speech that helps go towards the idea of civilization at its peak. When a good portion of the population is suckling at the teat.
And everybody's marveling at the rise of China. China isn't rising; they're just getting back to trend. Of the last 20 centuries, China's had the highest GDP in 18 of them. Mm. They're just getting back to trend.
Yeah, I spent some good time traveling there this year, and when you sink yourself into Chinese history, I think it was like in the 1700s, they had a population of 180 million or something. It's just astronomical what the country has been doing for millennia. Yeah.
And it's the internet that has caused the growth of China. Mm. The ability to hit the send button on the internet and send a set of diagrams to China to have the widget made there. China doesn't have something that we have quite a lot of, which is research and development. Mm. They've been taking it, and this is going to get us to the big trend. The big trend that I've been playing is that, once I figured out that I might be right on this peak of U.S. civilization call, the way I decided to play that was to begin making bets in companies that impact the security of the homeland. So I've been making bets in cybersecurity, if you will. That's probably another whole interview, but my view is that the war in cyber is the first war in history that cannot end. There's no one to surrender. What's worse is that we're facing thousands of armies, from nation states to criminal gangs to terrorist organizations to, pimply ass teenagers in the dorm room. We're facing thousands of armies, and the war in cyber that I fondly call Web War One ain't going very well. All of the data has been stolen. It's all been compromised. Virtually every network has been hacked and compromised. So that's the war I've been focusing on, because I can make a difference, and hopefully I have.
Just to back up for a second, because I didn't really ask you to define it yet. Peak civilization. How are you defining peak civilization exactly? And what does it mean to the average person from your perspective? And what kind of time frame are we talking? We're at it now, and when do things get worse? And what's the definition of worse? Lots of questions from me.
Well, I kind of defined it when I said that it it's a multi-factor equation, but the main factor in my model was the internet. Wouldn't it be ironic if our greatest gift to the planet, the internet, was the linchpin of our demise? And I think it is. I mean, I embrace the internet. I use it every second of the day. But the internet enabled arbitrage. And so the manifestation of arbitrage is the narrowing of differences. And so the way I measure peak of civilization is in standard of living differential. And that's been narrowed. That's how I define the peak of civilization. Our standard of living differential is collapsing vis-a-vis the rest of the world. The delta. And it's the same with there's many manifestations of it that are even scarier. That same differential, that same delta, it can also be applied to our military superiority. That is collapsing. And again, once again, the internet made that possible. The internet made it possible for our adversaries to steal our secrets. I call 9/11 the most successful non-nuclear military attack in the history of mankind. There's only one that comes close, which is the Trojan horse.
Well, you bring up a wonderful collection of topics for everyone to think about today. I know you are in the middle of a lot of different opportunities and insights and a very interesting network, Brad. And I think it's a lot of interesting food for thought. And I've known something just deep in my gut. Because I'm a kid who basically starts in the internet. I'm the guy that's sitting there in 1994 and 1995 and looking at AOL and stuff like that. And I still, frankly, look at, I think it was August of '95 when Netscape went public, as perhaps the gasoline that was thrown on the whole thing. That once people saw that and that unfolded, it seems like every market event in the last 17, 18 years traces back to that. But it's interesting times ahead. And, I think I also want to paint a picture too, because as you say, you're not a negative guy. You're not being a pessimistic guy. I think you're just being real. You're saying, look, keep your eyes open. Don't live in dreamland. Be prepared. Look for opportunity. Have fun. Have a nice life. But things are shifting. The sands are shifting.
Yeah, as a speculator, my job my job isn't to be optimistic or pessimistic. It's to be right. And I fully anticipate that there can be a lot of money made at the peak of civilization. It's just it's not going to involve the traditional ways of making money. If I'm right on some of these things, Western Union is a zero. Western Union goes away. And I say good riddance. They've been ripping the eyes out of immigrants sending money back to Mumbai for too many years.
Philippines, exactly. The entire Filipino economy is apparently funded by. Yeah. So
Western Union's a zero, and it deserves to be.
Yeah. Well, you've definitely got me inspired. So I'm going to have to step up and go my first Bitcoins. I think you've inspired me with the insight to step up. And I think you've probably inspired some of the audience to say, hey, if this guy's taking this strong of a look at it, I might need to take a strong look at it.
Yeah. Well, the key component, the last piece that I had to put in place to be able to buy Bitcoin was to be able to keep the Bitcoin wallet cyber secure. And so I've been making some investments in companies that have basically the secret sauce for doing that. So it's a key component. The wallet has to be cyber secure, or you'll lose your coins.
I was going to say, I guess that also kind of gets at some of my questions about potential government interference. Is there the concept, the digital currency is here. Bitcoin is the best opportunity today. There are some issues that could exist, but it's all going to get figured out because there's a motivated group of entrepreneurs around the world that realize it's time to take a little control back.
I think it's too late for the government to prohibit its use. I mean, it's already worldwide. You can as easily transmit. You can as easily use Bitcoin in Africa as you can in San Francisco. So it's too late, I think, for the government to stop it. They will and they should have the ability, to tax the gains, just like on a stock portfolio or a used truck. The governments will and should have the ability to tax those transactions, but I think they've lost their ability to prohibit its use. It's like saying, it's like China saying we're not going to use the internet. It's just a fact of life. By the way, Germany announced last week that they've authorized Bitcoin to be a unit of account. So they've basically given it the stamp of approval that its use is for any kind of transactions is permissible now in Germany.
Brad, I have one last question. I'll let you run.
Okay.
I start to assemble some Bitcoin assets, some Bitcoin wealth. Who knows what my Bitcoin wealth is besides me?
No one. That's how it was designed. An interesting story this week, there was another guy who didn't really understand what his Bitcoin wealth was. He bought $27 worth of Bitcoin when it first came out and forgot about them. When he finally remembered where his Bitcoin wallet was stored, he went back and checked his balance. And with $27 worth of Bitcoin, he just bought a $990,000 condo in Norway.
Will you accept my difference of opinion that if I have Bitcoin wealth, I like the idea that I might be the only person that can possibly know what that wealth is, and that I like the idea that with with governments around the world looking to confiscate nonstop, I like the idea of having a tool to balance out some of those powers.
I think that's how you should look at Bitcoin. It was nobody's talking about this. Last week, Russia confiscated all of the private pension plans in the country. They just took them. And the rationale was we're doing this for safety reasons to protect the private pension plans. And we're going to confiscate them all and roll them into a government plan. That was amazing.
Well, yeah, but you and I know what the funding levels are for the pensions that have been promised to state and federal employees in America. The math doesn't work. So at some stage of the game, as the boomer population ages, our government, the United States government, is going to have to do something to make good on these promises. And more than likely, the something they will do, I'm guessing, will be very similar to money 25% healthcare increase that went up last month. Is that there's just going to be decisions made by politicians to take from some to give to others with really no rhyme or reason as to why it's being done.
Yeah. It's funny, when I grew up on a farm in Iowa, my first job was I got a job as a page in the Iowa Senate, which was conveniently located 6 hours from the farm. When I got to Des Moines, a couple of senators kind of took me under their wing, and they would take me out with them at night when they were going out drinking with the lobbyists. So my job was to drive them all home at the end of the night. One night I'm driving home Senator Kennedy from Columbus Junction, Iowa. and I was really into politics. And I said, Senator, I've been looking forward to this conversation. I've been trying to figure you out. I've read all of your bills and read your statements, but you're kind of a hard duck to analyze. Can you help me? He'd had a couple of cocktails. He looked at me and he goes, boy, my job as an Iowa senator is to take money from the rich, votes from the poor, and then protect them from one another. I never forgot that.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. I made a comment on Facebook tonight, something to the effect of just, I'm still amazed that people don't understand that it's not as much a debate whether you want to consider yourself on the left or the right in America. It's really state power versus those that want to bring state power down a notch. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm not buying Bitcoin as a proxy for state power. I just think, as a speculator, and there's risks in Bitcoin, to be sure. There's no such thing as a riskless investment, but I think the risk of holding dollars is far greater than the risk of holding Bitcoin.
That's a strong statement. I mean, you're not just a young guy who's just starting out, who's read a few articles online and thinks you've been down a path of a lot of different experiences for a long time, and that's a very bold statement.
Yep. I don't believe that the dollar deserves to be a reserve currency. I don't think we deserve that.
Now, as you say that, though, is an opinion, is an educated thought on the subject, the dollar can continue to exist fine for the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years? Or are you imagining, is your predicate that there's a moment, are you actually, in your own mind, attaching a time frame to when a significant, I know there's significant events that have already happened, but perhaps a significant event where some of the things that you've been bringing up in this conversation manifest themselves in a way where the general public finally go, oh, shit.
Well, keep in mind, at the beginning of the conversation, I said something has changed in our lifetime, which never changed much before, the unit of time. So that oh shit moment, where everything is connected now, which is why I'm involved in cybersecurity. It's that connectivity has wide scale ramifications, many of them bad. So that aha moment could happen extremely quickly here. And my forecast, I think that Bitcoin is going to, here's my price forecast. I think Bitcoin is going to go to the price of gold, pause briefly, and then rally. And that could happen in a much shorter time than large scale currency shifts used to kind of happen. Used to happen over centuries and then decades. Things are happening pretty quick right now. So I anticipate that the general awareness of Bitcoin is going to increase substantially over the next year or two.
Well, for me, as someone who was looking forward to this conversation, and we really didn't, it was kind of a catch-up conversation too. We really didn't discuss where we wanted to go too much in this talk, but I think it's very inspiring for me to hear, and I'm sure for the audience as well, to hear your thoughts and your views and your concerns. And as you say, you're not trying to be a doom and gloomer. You're just kind of pointing out, like, look, folks, the sands are shifting. There is a chance as a speculator to benefit from these shifting sands, and maybe it's time to make an allocation.
That's my theory, and I told someone, I was giving a speech in Chicago about 5 months ago, and I said I'd rather be waterboarded than own 30-year treasuries. And I mean that. I think I'm spending a lot of time on Bitcoin, and I've been searching for the way to keep the wallet secure. That was the final piece. If you can do that, you can safely own Bitcoin. I fully expect it to be volatile, and particularly when it's a small market cap. It's probably the thinnest traded currency you could imagine. There's only 2.2 billion in circulation, but the price of Bitcoin could go to mind-boggling prices and still be infinitely usable as a currency.
It's got that asymmetric aspect to it.
Exactly. And even if the price of Bitcoin is $50,000 per coin, you'll still be able to buy a double decaf non-fat latte with that coin because it's infinitely divisible. Right now, it's divisible to 1/1,000,000th, but there's no reason why they'll figure out how to divide it further when the price requires that it do so.
Well, listen, I've kept you on longer than I should, but I think this is the kind of one of the first conversations I've really done like this to really get into a particular company, a particular opportunity, because I think it is so important and there is so much going on as a society. And the idea that a digital currency not controlled by government is something that we can all use. I think that for me, it's almost like a public service announcement. So I really appreciate you giving your insights, and hopefully we can chat again as things unfold. Hey, Brad, what would be the best place for people? I know they can go out and Google Brad Rotter, but is there a place online that people can check out some of your presentations that I know that I've seen over the years, or have you? Have you built the firewalls around you to keep the proletariat away? Or they just have to find you if they want to find you for some reason?
Yeah, I use LinkedIn, so anybody can find me on LinkedIn.
Well, listen, hey Brad, it was good chatting, and hopefully we can connect soon. I'll be to the West Coast probably in January, so I hope maybe we can find some time for a dinner.
Northern or Southern California?
I can be anywhere where it makes sense to be. So.
Yeah, I would enjoy an evening. It would be fun.
Hey, Brad, listen, it was good chatting, and we'll talk soon. I see a time when those awake will understand how to make money in up, down, and surprise markets. Whether new trader or experienced, college student or financial advisor, protecting against a crash or just trying to make a lot of money, trend following offers everyone an answer in uncertain times. To get started immediately, send me an email, michael@covel.com. I will send you the right trend following steps to take along with my free video. But if you want to buy and hold, trust the government and trust Wall Street, this is absolutely not for you.